The impossible solution. The crisis that united the galaxy. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council hummed with nervous energy. Representative beings from 47 different species filled the massive circular hall, their various forms creating a tapestry of biological diversity that would have amazed any newcomer to galactic politics. But today, there was no admiration for the wonder of unity. Today, there was only fear. Commander Vex Thor stood at the central podium, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the artificial lights. The insectoid leader of the Krell Collective rarely showed emotion, but today his mandibles clicked with barely contained anxiety. Behind him, a holographic display showed the grim statistics that had brought them all together. "Honored delegates," Vex Thor began, his voice translated into 47 languages simultaneously, "we face an extinction-level crisis. Our energy reserves are depleting faster than projected. Within 3 galactic cycles, 17 core worlds will go dark. Within 5 cycles, the collapse will be irreversible." A wave of distressed sounds rippled through the chamber. The Aquarians released bubbling chirps of concern. The lithoid representatives ground their rocky surfaces together in their equivalent of worried murmurs. Even the usually stoic cerebral collective sent pulses of anxious telepathic energy through the room. Vex Thor continued, displaying graph after graph of declining resources. "We have explored every known solution. The Meridian Empire attempted to harness their twin suns directly. The result was catastrophic. 3 billion souls lost. The Xanth Cooperative tried deep-core mining on gas giants. Their entire mining fleet was crushed by gravitational forces. The Tellurian Assembly even attempted to create artificial stars. The energy required to sustain them exceeded their output by a factor of 12. An elderly Aquarian delegate raised a webbed appendage. "What of fusion technology? The theoretical models have existed for millennia." Vex Thor's mandibles clicked in what those familiar with his species recognized as frustration. "Ambassador Thelios, every species in this chamber has attempted fusion energy. Every single one has failed. The containment problem remains unsolvable. The magnetic fields required are beyond our technological capacity. The energy input exceeds output. The materials needed do not exist in sufficient quantities. We have accepted this reality for 800 cycles." "Then we are doomed," said a voice from the crystalline sect, their form refracting light into rainbow patterns of despair. "Not necessarily," Vex Thor replied, though his tone suggested little hope. "We have one species that has not yet presented their findings, a relatively new member to our council. Perhaps they have insights we lack." As if on cue, the chamber doors opened with a pneumatic hiss. A figure walked through, distinctly bipedal, moving with a peculiar confidence that seemed almost out of place in the somber gathering. She was human, her species having joined the Galactic Council only 93 cycles ago, a mere blink in galactic timescales. Dr. Sarah Chen walked to the podium with an unusual spring in her step. She carried a data tablet under one arm and wore what appeared to be a slight smile. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her eyes sparkled with something that the other delegates couldn't quite identify. Was it amusement? "My apologies for the delay," Sarah said, her voice warm and somehow inappropriate for the gravity of the situation. "Traffic through the Sol system was terrible. We're building something rather large, and it's causing quite a backup." Vex Thor's antennae twitched. "Dr. Chen, we appreciate your presence. I assume humanity has reviewed the energy crisis data we transmitted?" "Oh, absolutely," Sarah replied,
Fascinating stuff. Really puts things in perspective. And, pressed Ambassador Thelios, what conclusion has humanity reached? Sarah's smile widened. We think we can solve it. The chamber erupted in chaos. Voices, clicks, chirps, and telepathic bursts filled the space with disbelief and confusion. Vexthor raised his primary appendages, calling for order. "Dr. Chen," he said carefully, "I must remind you that this crisis has stumped our greatest minds for centuries. The cerebral collective, whose intellectual capacity exceeds most organic species by orders of magnitude, has declared the problem unsolvable. What makes humanity believe they can succeed where all others have failed?" Sarah tapped her tablet, and a new hologram appeared above the podium. It showed a massive ring-shaped structure, bristling with technology that looked both familiar and completely alien to the assembled delegates. "Because we didn't know we were supposed to fail," Sarah said simply. The chamber fell silent. "Explain," Vexthor demanded. Sarah took a breath and began. "When we received the data about the galactic energy crisis, we naturally started researching what everyone else had tried. We found something interesting. About 400 cycles ago, there was a universal consensus among all galactic species that fusion energy was theoretically possible but practically impossible." "Correct," said a representative from the Lithoid Collective. "The mathematical models were sound, but the engineering challenges were insurmountable." "Right," Sarah nodded. "Everyone agreed it couldn't be done. And so everyone stopped trying. It became accepted wisdom, a fact of life. You moved on to other solutions, other technologies. The memo went out to the entire galaxy. Fusion doesn't work. Stop wasting resources on it." And humanity never got that memo," Sarah said with a grin. "We've been working on fusion energy for about 200 of our years. We didn't know we were supposed to give up. Nobody told us it was impossible." Ambassador Thelios made a sound like water being disturbed. "But the containment problem, the magnetic field requirements alone, are enormous." "Yes," Sarah interrupted gently. "So we didn't use magnetic fields, not in the way you were trying anyway. See, we looked at the problem differently. Everyone else was trying to contain fusion reactions the same way you'd contain any other dangerous process. Maximum pressure, maximum control, minimum variables. You were trying to build a perfect cage." She manipulated her tablet, and the hologram zoomed into the ring structure's core. "We built an imperfect cage and taught the reaction to stay inside it voluntarily." The cerebral collective sent a pulse of confusion. "That statement defies logical analysis. Plasma does not possess volition." "No, but it follows predictable patterns," Sarah explained. "We use a combination of rotating magnetic fields, laser compression, and gravity manipulation. Yes, we figured out localized gravity adjustment to create a kind of comfortable prison. The plasma naturally flows into the stable zones. It's not perfect containment. We lose about 3% of the reaction mass, but it works." "Impossible," stated a Missourian delegate flatly. "The energy requirements for gravity manipulation would exceed the fusion output." "Only if you generate the gravity field externally," Sarah countered. "We use the fusion reaction itself to power the gravity manipulation. It's a closed loop, self-sustaining once initiated. Takes a lot of energy to start up, about 3 days of ramping, but once it's going, it runs indefinitely as long as you feed it fuel." Vexthor leaned forward, his compound eyes focusing intently on the hologram. "Show us the efficiency data." Sarah pulled up another screen. The numbers that appeared caused several delegates to make sounds of astonishment. The fusion reactors were operating at 138% efficiency, a figure that should have been mathematically impossible. How? Vexthor breathed. We're capturing the neutrinos, Sarah explained. Everyone said you couldn't do anything with neutrino emissions because they barely interact with matter. So, we built a capture system 400 kilometers in diameter around each reactor. We only catch about 11% of the neutrinos, but 11% of something everyone else throws away adds up. The chamber sat in stunned silence. Finally, Ambassador Thelios spoke. You built working fusion reactors because you didn't know they were impossible? Pretty much, Sarah confirmed. We've got 6 of them operating in our home system. Another 12 under construction in our colony systems. Each one can power a planet the size of Earth for about 300 years on the hydrogen we can harvest.
Breaking every rule. 6 months later, the impossible made real. Ambassador Krell floated in his environmental suit, his amphibious body suspended in the nutrient-rich fluid that kept his skin moist and his gills functioning. Through the transparent aluminum viewport of the observation deck, he watched the human fusion station hanging in space like a mechanical star. The massive ring structure pulsed with contained energy, its surface covered in what appeared to be thousands of smaller rings, all rotating at different speeds and angles. It was beautiful. It was functional. And according to everything Krell had learned in his 3 centuries of life, it should not exist. Ambassador Krell, welcome aboard Fusion Station Prometheus. Dr. Sarah Chen floated beside him in zero gravity, her movements efficient and practiced. I'm glad you accepted our invitation to visit. How could I refuse? Krell's translator converted his underwater speech patterns into standard Galactic. Your fusion stations have been operational for half a cycle now, 3 systems powered by technology that was deemed impossible. I needed to see it with my own eyes. Sarah gestured toward the station. Would you like the technical tour or the philosophical one? I beg your pardon? The technical tour explains how it works, Sarah said with that peculiar human smile. The philosophical tour explains why it works when it shouldn't. Krell's chromatophores rippled with curiosity, changing his skin from deep blue to purple. The philosophical tour, I think. Sarah pushed off from a handhold, guiding them through the observation deck toward an interior corridor. Good choice. Let me ask you something, Ambassador. How many fundamental laws of physics did your species discover? Laws? 17 primary laws with approximately 243 derivative principles. And once you discovered these laws, what did you do? Krell considered the question. We built our civilization around them. We designed our technology to work within their constraints. We accepted them as the boundaries of what was possible. Exactly, Sarah said as they entered a lift that would take them deeper into the station. You find the rules and then you play by them. It's logical, it's sensible, it's safe. And humans do not? Sarah laughed, a sound like bubbling water. Oh, we find the rules. We write them down very carefully. We teach them in schools. And then we spend the rest of our time trying to figure out how to break them. The lift descended, and Krell felt the subtle shift as they entered the station's rotating section, where artificial gravity took hold. His suit adjusted automatically, allowing him to walk beside Sarah through corridors that thrummed with barely perceptible energy. Let me show you something, Sarah said, leading him into a control room. Holographic displays filled the air, showing data streams and energy readings that Krell's trained eye could barely follow. A young human technician looked up from his console. Dr. Chen, we're ready for the demonstration. Excellent. Ambassador, watch this. Sarah pointed to a display showing the plasma reaction in the station's core. See that plasma temperature? 15 million degrees Kelvin. That's far below the theoretical minimum for sustained fusion. Correct. According to the physics textbooks, we need at least 30 million degrees for the deuterium-tritium reaction we're using. At 15 million, the reaction should die immediately. But it doesn't. No, Sarah agreed.
Because we're not just relying on temperature, we're using quantum tunneling enhancement. We fire precision lasers at the plasma at exactly the right frequency to increase the probability of quantum tunneling events. We're essentially cheating the temperature requirement by manipulating quantum probability fields. Krell's translator had difficulty processing his response. The Heisenberg uncertainty principle doesn't work that way. It does if you push it hard enough, Sarah said cheerfully. We didn't accept uncertainty as a limitation. We turned it into a tool. The cerebral collective told us it was impossible to manipulate quantum probability fields without causing wave function collapse. But we tried anyway, and it turned out you can, as long as you do it indirectly through harmonic resonance. The technician spoke up. Dr. Chen, the gravity manipulation system is ready for demonstration as well. Ah, yes. Sarah pulled up another display. Ambassador, you mentioned earlier that your species discovered 17 primary physical laws. How many of those laws relate to gravity? 3. Universal gravitation, relativistic gravity, and quantum gravity interactions. And all 3 say that you need massive amounts of mass or energy to generate significant gravitational fields, correct? Of course, that is the nature of gravity. Sarah's smile widened. Watch this. She nodded to the technician who input a series of commands. On the display, a small section of the station's interior suddenly showed objects beginning to orbit each other in complex patterns, despite being in a zero-gravity zone. Tools, equipment containers, even floating water droplets began moving in graceful arcs around an invisible point in space. We're generating a localized gravity well with the mass energy equivalent of about 2 kilograms. According to your laws and ours, that should be impossible. The gravitational force should be negligible. How? Krell breathed, his chromatophores flashing through a dozen colors of astonishment. We're not actually creating gravity. We're bending space-time directly using a quantum field oscillator. It looks like gravity, acts like gravity, and for all practical purposes, is gravity. But technically, we're exploiting a loophole in how space-time responds to certain frequency patterns. The crystalline sect told us this approach would require more energy than exists in a star. They were wrong. It requires very specific energy at very specific frequencies. Once you hit the resonance point, space-time bends with minimal energy input. Krell moved closer to the display, watching the objects dance in the artificial gravity well. Your species has been spacefaring for less than a century. How did you develop such advanced technology so quickly? Sarah gestured for him to follow as they left the control room and entered a long corridor lined with windows showing different sections of the station. Because we don't know when to quit. Let me tell you about the Great Filter Theory. The what? About 150 Earth years ago, before we achieved faster-than-light travel, our scientists were puzzled by a question. Where is everyone? We could see billions of potentially habitable planets, but no signs of advanced civilizations. We developed a theory called the Great Filter. The idea was that there must be some tremendous barrier that prevents most species from reaching the stars. Some challenge so difficult that most civilizations fail to overcome it. And what was this barrier? We never found it. We kept looking for this insurmountable obstacle, but we never encountered it. We went from atmospheric flight to landing on our moon in 66 years, from our moon to our first colony on Mars in another 43 years, from Mars to faster-than-light travel in 78 years. We kept waiting for the impossible challenge, but it never came. They entered another observation area, this one showing the construction of a new station in the distance. Hundreds of robotic craft and human-piloted vessels worked in perfect coordination, assembling another fusion ring at breathtaking speed. When we finally met other species, Sarah continued, we found the Great Filter. But it wasn't a technological barrier or a physical limit. It was cultural. Every species we met had encountered problems that seemed impossible, and they had accepted that impossibility. They had filtered themselves. Krell's skin shifted to a thoughtful green. You're saying we gave up too easily? Not exactly, Sarah said gently. You made rational decisions based on available data and reasonable projections. If something seems impossible after centuries of trying, it makes sense to focus resources elsewhere. That's logical survival behavior. But humans don't do that? We do, Sarah corrected, but we also have a phrase. Impossible just means nobody's done it yet. For every human who accepts that something can't be done, there are 10 more who take that as a personal challenge. We're a stubborn species. Irritatingly, persistently, sometimes stupidly stubborn. Krell gestured at the fusion station visible through the window. This stubbornness has saved the galaxy from an energy crisis. This is just the beginning, Sarah said. Can I show you something else? Something we haven't announced to the Council yet? She led him to a secured section of the station where her credentials granted them access to a laboratory filled with equipment Krell didn't recognize. At the center of the room stood a transparent chamber containing what appeared to be a small tree, its leaves an unusual silver color. Ambassador, meet Project Eden. This is a genetically modified organism capable of performing photosynthesis using radiation across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, including hard gamma rays. We're preparing to terraform worlds that the Council has declared uninhabitable. The Forbidden Worlds? The radiation-soaked planets near pulsar systems? Forbidden is such a permanent word. We prefer challenging. But the radiation levels would kill any known organism within hours. Any known organism, Sarah agreed. This isn't a known organism. This is something new. We started with earth plants, added genes from extremophile bacteria, threw in some synthetic DNA sequences we designed, and kept iterating until we had something that thrives in radiation that would sterilize normal life. In 10 years, we estimate we can have breathable atmospheres on 17 worlds the Council wrote off as permanently uninhabitable. Krell sank into a nearby chair,